Today's guest has built a powerful program and a team at the Career Network Ministry, helping folks in job transition, along with serving on a number of private and public company boards. But we're going to go back and we're going to talk about his success in business and his involvement in over 70 mergers and acquisition transactions valued in excess of $25 billion. Let's have ourselves a pocket sized pep talk, and we'll not only hear his story, we'll hear how that story of his can inspire you.
A Pocket Sized Pep Talk, the podcast that can help energize your business and your life with a quick, inspiring message. Now, here's your host, Rob Jollis.
Today's guest, Bob Korzenowski, worked his way through the finance world as a CPA, a controller, VP of finance, and ultimately CFO. He led a little company called Network Solutions through their IPO, which was just one of those 70 mergers and acquisition transactions I mentioned. I don't often get a chance to bring in a personal friend to the podcast, but this one is special. Welcome to the show, Bob.
Rob, thanks for having me today. Looking forward to chatting with you.
Yeah, we talk, but we don't really sit down and talk this way. So I am looking forward to it. And I will tell you, I've been whittling away at those questions, and I'm ready to go. Let's see how we do here. I really, until I sort of reached out for the podcast, had not gotten the backstory a lot. That 25 billion resonates with me. But there's a lot of confusion, not just in mergers and acquisitions, but common myths about finance and accounting. Give me one or two that you'd like to debunk, just as we kind of warm our way into this conversation.
Yeah, no, glad to do that. I know when I started out, I think there was a vision of almost like a bookkeeper, someone with a green eye shade that sits back of the room with back then a big calculator banging on keys, now a computer, and they're kind of back office rather than kind of front office folks. You fancy sales guys go out and sell everything, and they just kind of keep track of it at the end of the day and make sure the beans are all in the right place. But it's actually one of the strongest venues to the CEO role is really a finance role. So it's kind of a core understanding that you need to be in business. And I think for the right people, it's a chance really to be a business partner, whether that's to the division manager or whether that's to a group manager or the president or COO, whoever you're supporting. I think you get to be his or her business partner. And for me, I was lucky enough to be able to find that avenue. And it really, I think, is quite an exciting field where you use that background and get to dive into business and understand business better.
Well, I think we just kind of uncovered one of the first puzzles of the Bob Korzenowski world, which is when you take something that's stereotyped one way and you grow it into other areas. I remember when I first started speaking professionally, meeting Harry Dent. I don't know if you've heard him, an economist, but Harry Dent was an economist who could communicate, who could speak in very simple terms and tones. Yeah. And he became a massive success. He was a wonderful economist, but he has sort of grown that other piece that we all assumed economists don't have.
Right.
And putting those two together made him dangerous.
Yeah.
I also think, Bob, about what was the movie The Producers, where the song "Unhappy, Very, Very Unhappy." I believe that's a room full of accountants.
That's
so we
right.
have the visualization I think you were trying to describe.
And no doubt some jobs can probably get that way, but the ones I saw really were opportunities to really be business partners along the realm and be lucky enough to be at some businesses that are growing. And when you're with businesses that are growing, it lifts a lot of boats.
I can imagine. So you, here we go. We've just already, in our first question, really kind of looked at a different angle. So when you're advising people, and you're talking to somebody who wants to go into finance or an accounting, or pursue a career similar to yours,
yeah,
what advice do you give them?
Well, I think for the broadest opportunities coming out of college is if you can get into public accounting. So, a CPA firm versus working for a corporation. Now, there are some really fine corporations, and I have had friends who have had tremendous careers going into corporations. But public accounting gives you a broader perspective of a whole bunch of different businesses. You know, one day you're working on a meat packing company, and the next day you're with a tech company, and the third day you're with uh, maybe a healthcare provider. So you can get industry focused, but often you're getting a broader perspective of different businesses and different people and different interactions. And once you get that CPA certificate, that is so important uh, to be able to make that next leap. So you go invest kind of 3 to 5 years in public accounting and decide, is that a track I want to stay on to try to become a partner? Or is that really giving me great experience to now make that next leap, whether it's to one of your clients, which was in my case, I was in public accounting 3 years, and one of my clients here in Virginia, made me an offer to come be their corporate controller. They had just gone public. So for me, that was a big step at a relatively early age that I would never have been able to make just going into a firm, into a regular firm, being an accountant. So 3 years of experience, and I'm 26 years old, and I'm the chief accounting officer for a publicly held company, way over my head, trying not to go down for the third time. But it was that public accounting platform that gave me that opportunity to make a big step.
Well, that's interesting, and it's a great lesson, and I'm sure you've learned a lot of lessons along the way. Uh, give me give me one or two more lessons that you've learned somewhere in the journey that had a major impact on your, not just your career, but possibly your life.
Yeah. So I would say, as I've looked back, I probably didn't realize it when I was going through it. I certainly didn't. But, the value of mentors. And I didn't go seek them out. I got lucky enough to have three of them at different stages of my career that were really impactful, right? They really saw much more in me than I saw in myself and guided me to that next step when it would have been easy to fail. So I think nowadays people are much better. I mean, I have people that call me up and ask me if I will mentor them, right? So I never was proactive enough to do that. So it's always better to be lucky than good. But I do think seeking mentors nowadays and valuing mentors is really important at all stages of your career. So when you ask folks at any age, and certainly, do you have a mentor? Have you thought about mentors and thinking about that? I think mentors can play a really valuable role. The other one, though now we talk about networking a lot. I did not consider myself a great networker, but when I landed here in Washington and was really over my head in that publicly held company I was corporate controller for, I went to a public accounting firm, one of the managing partners, and I pitched him on this idea of him hosting a dinner and me bringing 3 or 4 CFOs to the dinner. And as I told him, he could have the pleasure of paying, and he would get a lot smarter stay very current on the key issues that our industry at that time, government contractors, were facing. For me, it was a way to get a community that I could leverage for context and information. And he grabbed it and ran with it. And that group pretty quickly expanded to the first 100 people that called up could get a seat. And it was only for CFOs and C-level people of government contractors. By then we had to go from the accounting firm and add a bank. And then we added a law firm, and they all hosted it. And we went to a BDM at that time and got the huge conference facilities they had. And it was through that network that someone else tapped me on the shoulder and said, we want you to come do this for me. Right. So the value of networking, which again, I see more in hindsight, looking in the rearview mirror, than I did strategically. I did it tactically to survive, but it ended up giving me that next big jump and expanding my network here in Virginia. So especially when you're so busy and trying to survive those stages of, you got a job that's demanding and you're starting a young family life, and how can you even think about time for networking? Looking back, the value of mentors and the value of networking were really critical. And then, probably the lesson I learned from my dad and eventually, saw in other members of my family was hard work. Hard work is generally by example. When you see my dad working 3 jobs to put he was a single parent at a young age, and 3 kids going through private Catholic school, and him working 3 jobs in warehouses and factories, whatever he needed to do. So, if I had any version of it, it was a humble work ethic that kind of served as the baseline to get back in there and don't leave until you're done and then some.
Well, you hit on 3 points here. And I can tell people who are listening that Bob is pretty serious when he talks about networking. We've worked together off and on over the years, trying to help people in job transition through that career network ministry. Wonderful meetup you should look up. And but I'm always moving folks over to Bob when they're having networking issues, because he's been able to sort of take that and really create a process behaviors around it. That, and I think you undersell yourself a little bit when, and I know he was a very humble person. And boy, there's a whole lot of luck that goes into a life, but there's also working hard and putting yourself in position and not looking for the proper time to exceed expectations, but to make that a fast principle and a rule that says, I don't care who's looking. That is going to be my calling card. And when it is, all of a sudden you tell that story of, well, maybe I was in the right place at the right time. I'm guessing somebody appreciated your work ethic. That's where luck and hard work kind of meet together. But the third part that I pulled out of you in terms of that mentor just now, and I was going to ask you was, do you think your dad counts as a mentor? Or should we look outside that parental group?
Well, I think, if you're lucky enough to have the right relationships, your dad can be, right? And if your dad can be from a personal perspective, and if he has the right knowledge of where you want to go, beyond that, maybe even into the business world or professional world, or I know you have some of the comedic skills that have impacted your children. So and so some dads can go beyond that. And if they're fortunate enough to have that relationship with their children, where their children are looking for insight and guidance for them, and they deal with it appropriately, it's wonderful. It's certainly the baseline and the first and probably most important mentoring relationship that starts. But I think the chance to then add on to those, don't realizing that your dad or your mother, whoever it may be, can be an important mentors to you, as can family and friends. But don't stop the ability to reach out to people who can offer guidance and wisdom, because it's like a cocktail, right? The more pieces we put in it and stir it around, it becomes pretty special. It's not your average gin and tonic anymore, because you've got a lot of outside input, and often input that, even though we're sometimes too close to things to even see them, that somebody from the outside can look at quite easily and say, hey, I've been there, done that. Don't go down the same route I went, or do go down the same route I went, and save some heartache and pain that with their advice.
Yeah, excellent advice. And I was when I formed the question in my head, I was leaning towards, I think the right relationship would make that very special. And as I'm listening to your answer, I'm thinking, it's funny, I coached a lot of basketball teams, about 51 of them, I think, at one through my career as a coach. But I always had an assistant coach, and I coached really every kid but my kid. And it's not that the reason why we had a wonderful relationship was because my kids would allow me to coach them somewhat. But I felt that they needed that other voice in their head, just like that assistant coach would look at me and say, okay, and I'm right behind you on all of them. You got mine.
That's right.
So I think there's a lot of wisdom there's some life lessons. There's some general forming. When my dad was alive and my father-in-law was alive, I went to them frequently with questions and ideas, but not really about professional speaking, not really about career moves. It was just more of kind of life issues. And I found a nice little separation there. But I think you hit it on the head. A lot of it has to do with the relationship going on.
And I think there are professional mentors and there are personal mentors and there are different people who can play. I think it is, Rob, and I'm not very good at it, is to be as inquisitive as you can be. I mean, and I know we both get to meet with a lot of different folks, and the person that's sitting there just waiting for you to give them stuff all the time, they still have gone out of their comfort zone to come see us, but it's like a one-way dump. First, the person that's just asking a lot of questions and energized and excited to be part of the meeting with you and just saying, I want to pull every morsel I can out of you, is such a more exciting meeting to be part of. And we need to be more of that to people that we can still be pulling stuff from, no matter where we are along that runway.
Yeah. And we won't talk shop here, but I will
No.
tell you that for me, the people that are struggling the most coincidentally will struggle in that area.
Yep.
People that we work with where we think you've got a lot of really good tools, we're giving a nudge here and a little brush up over there, coincidentally tend to show up with a lot of questions, and I'm taking a lot of notes, but I think it's part of the package in a sense. Anyway, okay, so I'm listening to you, and it sounds like all life's been a bowl of cherries for Bob Korzenowski, but we all have different hurdles that we have to face, and sometimes people will see kind of our finishing product where we are right now, and go, boy, what an easy ride that must have been. But we do face hurdles. Tell me a hurdle or two that you had to overcome.
Yeah. So, when I think about things that we definitely didn't do right, you mentioned that big number of companies that I've been associated with in the M&A process. And when Network Solutions merged with VeriSign, I had been at the time CFO of Network Solutions, and VeriSign was the acquiring company. They had a CFO. And so the CEO, who had been on the Network Solutions board and was a good personal friend, Stratton Sclavo, said, Bob, what role would you like? How about you run the East Coast, right? Or something like that. And I ended up taking a role as head of corporate development and strategy. And that ended up primarily being mergers and acquisitions, because we were very acquisitive. But we bought 52 companies in the next 7 years. That was, in hindsight, is way too many. Right? And so I know that in my role as the leader of that group, I wish I had had more foresight that we couldn't be as aggressive as we got. Now, I do think it was the right thing for the company to be aggressive. Our CEO realized that we had an overpriced currency in 2000 when we merged, and that he really wanted to try to grow a very large company. And so we made a lot of bets in a lot of different industries, but it's really hard to integrate, assimilate, and then grow all those different pieces when you're doing some 4 or 5 acquisitions a quarter in some years, right? So the quality of the work, I think, went through some pain and suffering. Today, what is now VeriSign today is only a portion of the old Network Solutions. Everything else has been spun off. And they still have a great company that, is I think got a 15 or $20 billion market cap. So it's still a very successful, highly profitable company. And, but what we went through from my perspective was, when you're the leader of a company trying to help with strategy, obviously the CEO is the leader, the other business leaders have their input into their own strategy for their own businesses. But I don't think I was very successful as a sounding board to keep us as probably balanced as we needed to during the stage where we got into a hyper growth mode. That I think we could have been more successful had we dialed that back somewhat and really spent more time on the integration and care and feeding of that senior talent that comes over, because it's you're buying people who now get a nice big paycheck in their pocket, and they've been successful entrepreneurs, and everyone is knocking on their door for them to come do it for them again. So it's a model that takes more care and feeding than I think we probably provided, but I wouldn't have traded the experience or the fun or the opportunity to go represent VeriSign to so many different people around the world and, convince them to come be part of that extended vision.
Really fascinating. I almost heard a positive, factual positive out of that answer, by the
It's,
way, which is a language Bob and I speak.
That's right.
A language Bob taught me to speak, by the way. But when you're dealing with a tough question or a tough issue, to look at it, come in positively, relate the facts of the situation and finish positively. You actually just heard him, I think, unconsciously model his own behavior. But what you also heard him unconsciously model is the power of a successful mentor. Because, look, I like hanging around people that have generally been successful. They're fun to look at. I can't identify with a whole lot, but they certainly are lucky people. I'm not so sure they're wise people, but they're fortunate people. And we've seen people that have struggled, and there are lessons to be learned there. But the truly wise people and the truly valuable mentors, in my opinion, are the ones who can articulate both those valuable moves and the moves they do differently. And that's how we acquire wisdom. So what you just heard really was a very humble response to person that anyone who knows Bob at all will tell you, the man is successful. Of course he is, but he's telling you right now things that he does differently, things that he's learned from. I think, and I'm pausing here and mentioning this, and we'll be back to Bob in a moment. But I'm mentioning this because it is the window to success, in my opinion, which is to allow yourself to revisit and learn and process and understand that that's the big picture. Success is wonderful. Failure, we work our way through. But having a knowledge of what you did right and wrong, that's when you can take that knowledge to other people. So a great answer to an interesting question, I think. So let's get to the positive. Back to the positive. Some things that you're most proud of professionally, and I'm curious about that because you have a big bucket to pull from, and I've got my hand. I'm giving you a minute and a half. So
there you go.
Get your best ones.
Well, and they're probably not ones that flash up big numbers or awards, but they're kind of ones that get into our core values, right? And the first one is I was CFO of Network Solutions, and I got a call on a Sunday that our CEO had just resigned. So we had been public about 16 or 17 months. Stock had made a climb from like $11 or $12 up to about 60. And he was upset at the board, and someone offered him a very large package to leave. And we were very good friends, but he had never mentioned it to me. And he called and resigned on a Sunday. And so when your stock has just made a 4 or 5-fold run, you're envisioning how terrible that next Monday is going to be. And so I was the primary interface to all of our investors. And we got through that day, and the stock did not move much at all, which was a great compliment to the rest of the team and the strength of our business model, because it sure felt like it was going to crater. But that the board at that time asked me to become COO while they looked for another CEO. And in a late night call, I told, at the time we had about 2/3 of our employees had stock options and the other third didn't. We ran a big call center, 300-400 people in our call center. And none of them had any equity in the company. And I told the board that I would only do the job if they would give all the employees options, the people that didn't have them. And so at that time, it was my only requirement. They didn't have to do anything else, not anything else other than the employees that didn't have options had to get options. And, they got 500 options, I think, Rob, so not a huge number. But those 500 options ended up being enough for those people to put their kids through college. And so none of them know that. There's probably 5 people on the planet that know that. You're now number 6. But I think that one moment in time when you got a chance to reflect on your core values and what's important, that's something that down deep will always be high on that list. That there's a whole bunch of people in our call center that put their kids through college because of that decision. The other one I would say is much less dramatic, but
you can't top that one.
No, I can't top
We're
that.
going to take a step back now because I'm just taking a deep breath on the first one. Let me hear the second one.
I'd say Jim Collins, who we all know, famous business author that's, was best-selling business author for probably 15 years running with a few of his books. Jim told us that he turned down 24 of 25 requests to come and advise companies during that window. But he came to VeriSign and spent a day with us. One of the things we were trying to figure out with everything we were going through, we decided we needed to revisit our core values. We had 50 companies we had bought. We're trying to integrate. We're very much global now rather than US centric, and really revisiting kind of the core values. And so he said, here's what you do. Trip to Mars. So you're going to pull 5 employees from the company of your, 5,000 employees, whatever we had. I think we had 100 people in the senior management team. So say 5 people out of this 100-person management team, and you're going to put them in a spaceship and they're going to Mars. And when they get off the planet, they're going to represent VeriSign. So everyone here gets to pick 5 people, whoever they are, they get in a room and they come up with the core values, and those are VeriSign's core values. Because you think they represent VeriSign. And CEO can't come and change them. They get together, they decided these are the core values that we think we represent, and this management team thinks you best represent VeriSign. And so, though I wasn't a core VeriSign employee, I came through VeriSign acquiring Network Solutions. It was, I was honored that this group of 100 people would vote me to be one of the 5 people that got to put together the future core values of VeriSign.
Oh, you were one of the ones that went to Mars.
I went to Mars, and before, we didn't publicize the fact that we did that trip, but Elon Musk has talked to me about it and the experience, and so I've shared that with him. But and in no way I was the leader of that group, but it was a great group of people. And a couple of the people actually were in my group that worked for me. So we had a fairly good, 3 of the 5 people were people that were in my group. And we got to put in, not so much, so that was one part of it, but then doing them and seeing those core values actually change the way VeriSign operated was a really unique and powerful window of time in the combination of all those companies that we put them into an acronym, and that spelled rapid, and then we actually called people out when they were doing something that was outside of what we believed were the core values. We'd say, Rob, that's not rapid, and it became how we reviewed people. It was on evaluation. We had them up in the conference rooms, and those kind of core values really got deeply imprinted. And where people who, Jack Welch would say this, if you performed and you didn't have our core values, you didn't belong here. And for the longest time before that, if you performed, you were here for as long as you performed, and to actually see those core value change come to where we hired based upon them and we separated based upon them, was another, powerful, proud moment to see that core values can be real and they can change a company even after it's been around and been very successful.
Well, the fact that you managed towards them, that you managed the company with those core values, I can remember my time at Xerox, where one of the most impressive things to me was that as a salesman in a large sales force, we had multiple criteria on how we were evaluated. One of them was obviously where were we in terms of our given plan, a rather big one in the sales industry. And as an insurance agent, previous insurance agent, the only criteria
Right.
in as a New York Life employee, which is fine. But I was puzzled at first when I looked at it and I said, wait a minute, that's a third of how you're evaluating me. And some of it was we had, leadership through quality improvement, problem solving processes, uh, quality families that we'd form on our own to try and improve the company. And factors like that, pieces like that were part of how we were evaluated. So you could be 250% of your given sales plan and receive, in a sense, a C grade if we're grading me right now,
Yeah.
because I'm not adhering to the other core values of the company. And I sort of understood it then, Bob, but years after I left Xerox, when I smiled, I thought, it's no coincidence, certainly, and I'm dating myself, but look, I'm in the 80s right now, early
Yeah.
90s. But when you met with a Xerox person and you met with them from time to time, I always believed you knew two things before we opened our mouth. One, whatever we were going to show you was going to cost more than anything else. But two, you were going to get somebody who was sharp, paid attention, had the customer's interest at heart. And that was through process, not through luck.
Yeah.
And that's what you're describing to me on your side, in a sense. And I'm inspired to write about that because I think it's almost forgotten by a lot of companies, or it's a secret.
Yeah. Yeah.
Wow. Anyway, all right. I also learned that, in a sense, I'm not sure if you grew food on Mars, but if you did grow food, then you were the first Martian. You beat Matt Damon.
We were way up there, but I don't remember the food, Pat. There
Okay.
was drink though, but I don't remember food.
By the way, I think that if I remember that movie right, I think that was the criteria. When you grow food, then you become an
That was good.
inhabitant of the planet. So
Good movie. I could actually go back and watch that again.
Okay, well, certainly through the years, and I've known Bob for about 10 now, I guess. Uh, you've certainly influenced me. Give me two or three people that have influenced you.
Um, well, I mentioned those mentors, and they're all kind of different. In public accounting, I was lucky enough that there were three partners, and one of the partners had a son that was in. Two of the partners had sons that were in the business. In one case, one of the partner's sons went right from college to the firm. The other partner's son went to the largest public accounting firm and came to the firm. He had a much broader perspective. And I was in the public accounting world, you have all these different jobs, and kind of the lead managers get to pick who they want on the jobs. And so I got lucky that this one particular manager, who was clearly going to be a partner in the firm someday, and probably, in my opinion, he was the smartest of the people at the next level. I got to be on a lot of his jobs, and I got to see the way he treated people and the value that he provided to clients, and his method for balancing out all those pieces. To be at a client and deliver a high quality product, on budget, meeting or exceeding expectations, but to do it in a fashion that really was, I'm your business partner. I'm not your accountant. I'm your business partner. That really emulating that, and then wanting to do that same thing. And because that firm was growing quickly, we had Reebok back when Paul Fireman couldn't afford to pay his bill before the sneaker business went crazy. But that desire that said, I was there a year, and I had some of my own small accounts. And I remember following Paul Schneider's example. I'd go and say to the guy, hey, I'm off the clock at 5:00, but you want to talk about business, I'll be here for as long as you want, including let's go to dinner. Really gave me this sense of, I'm your business partner. I'm not an accountant. So that started me on that track. And then when I came to work here in Virginia, the guy that was the CFO when I came was an older gentleman, very near retirement. But Dick Smithson really taught me a lot about all the interpersonal skills of dealing in a larger corporate environment, how to deal cross division, how to deal again, with people that work for you and the people that you worked for, how to communicate and deal with outside service providers. So he had been in the business 40 years, and he really, he treated me like a second son. And they became part of my family. And so he was a next great place to be. And then the last of them, a guy named Mike Higgins. When I went to SAIC, Mike ran all the environmental business. And in the 80s, the environmental business of the 80s was like the internet business of the 90s. It was rocking and going like crazy. Mike Mike was Mike was a big guy, 6'4", 230, 240, big beard. He background, he was valedictorian of his high school class, and he's a crazy partying guy, so you knew the principal hated to give him that honor. But then he went to West Point, and then he went in special forces in Vietnam. And then he came back and got his master's at MIT. And he was beyond brilliant. We had a dozen different environmental areas we dealt with where people, they spent their whole life on this one project dealing with this issue. That was 50 hours a week, 52 weeks a year. And Mike would walk into a meeting and he would be able to tell the person something they needed to do differently and give them a different perspective on what they were doing in almost every meeting. Staggeringly brilliant. But Mike again he just fully embraced me and let me be his right-hand guy in a big company environment where I was at a smaller government contractor. It felt like family. Dick Smithson made it feel like family. SAIC is when I was there, 8 or 10,000 people, growing to 50, but offices all around the world, headquarters in California. And, Mike became my biggest proponent and sponsor and educated me every day. And just so smart that his bandwidth for knowledge base and way he did things were amazing. Little crazy, but another guy that, at various times when you're in a landing place and you don't know whether you're walking in quicksand or whether you're on a trampoline and you're about to be propelled to a whole nother level, Mike made sure that I never fell in the quicksand. And when he thought I was ready, he made sure there was a trampoline that I was going to be able to bounce on and kind of get to the next level in SAIC.
Yeah. It's interesting hearing the names, but I want to push back a little bit and remind people that you have to be open for this. You have to, you can't walk in there and have a flash of success and say, well, that's it. I don't really need to learn or listen. You're listening to a very successful man go back and tell you about multiple people and advisors and mentors that have helped along the way. I got to tell you, I'm not sure what decade we're in right now, but I will tell you in terms of your conversation with these people. But I wasn't as blessed as you are, and as you were. I thought I knew a little bit more than a lot of people around me, and so I had to learn the hard way a couple of times. But I, you have a couple of good knocks to the head, and I figured it out. And it's interesting hearing how almost natural that was. It seems for you. So there you are.
I've had all these years to reflect, Robin. It was about, I don't know, 5 years ago, probably, that I actually sit down and wrote them all letters and called them up and shared that with each of them individually. So it's kind of fresh in my mind from that 5 years ago, kind of sitting down and putting pen to paper and sharing with them kind of the role they played. And it helps, like I said, in each case, the CPA firm was growing crazy fast. The Halifax guys were having some success, and SAIC environmental business was short of Network Solutions, the fastest growing thing I'd ever been part of. So being lucky enough to be in good businesses does lift a lot of boats. But that when you're in good businesses, you also have the chance of drowning in that boat. because it exceeds your personal capabilities. And oftentimes a lot of people get replaced. Like when a number of people went over from SAIC to Network Solutions when we bought Network Solutions, and we're trying to take it public, but not many of them survived because we were going through crazy dramatic growth. And then it was a very natural tendency when you see a big opportunity to say, oh, we should go outside and get someone with more experience that maybe has dealt with this little crazy growth. So all of us got to be in the boat, and everyone's rowing hard, and most of them smarter than me, but not all the boats did not spring a hole along that journey across the lake.
That's great. I got to tell you, I'll just push back to something you said about a minute ago, and you ran right through the stop sign. Like, well, I guess everybody does this. I want anybody who's listening right now to just take a pause and think about something very small and almost obscure that Bob just threw out there, which was took a pen to paper. I'm assuming that's pen to paper, right, Bob? That wasn't an email, right?
Right.
Pen to paper, and writing down thoughtfully what somebody meant to you, what somebody who cared for you, who looked out for you, who did something. Joe McCoy comes to my mind right now. Guy at Xerox took me under his wing. I got my names. I haven't written Joe McCoy a letter. I would think that if I hadn't been listening carefully, I would have said, "Good idea, Bob. I'll send him an email." But no, a letter in my handwriting, which isn't terrific anymore, but I'm going to grind it out anyway. I can do it if I slow down. I just think that's an extraordinary thing to do. I'm trying, Bob, let's figure out the first person we ever hear of anybody who says, I got a letter from some guy thanking me, and I really made me furious. Really hurt my feelings.
From 20 years ago, right?
Yeah, how dare he? So I just think it speaks to the nature of who you are, but I just want you to know that wasn't lost on me. And I just think that's another just terrific piece that's coming out of this conversation. So we're coming down the home stretch with Bob Korzenowski, and I got to tell you, maybe a year from now, I got to have you back on because I think we're scratching the surface. But you've got these mentors, you've got these events, you've got the hard work, a little touch of luck. You're succeeding at what sounds like a higher level than perhaps you had anticipated in your high school days, let's say.
Yes.
But you retire at age 50. So what caused you to retire from business at 50? And do you ever have little pangs of wishing you'd stayed in the game?
Yeah, Rob, it's a good question. When I was going through all that stuff and seeing a lot of people who worked hard and were really smart that didn't get to stay on the boat, as we were experiencing some great success, it was really clear to me that the success wasn't just because of me. Obviously, there's other people involved, but for me, spiritually looking at it and saying, God has had something to do with this, and I don't think the reason he's had something to do with this is so that I can continue just making more money. Obviously, that could be it. Who knows? But as I kept on searching deeper for what could the reason be, the thing that kept on coming back to me, because my wife and I had been involved in the nonprofit space for a long time, and it kept on resonating with me that probably the thing that I should be doing is stopping and figuring out what the rest of the journey was supposed to be, because I'm not very good about figuring out while I'm on the journey. I have a tendency to just keep the head down and keep on going and don't spend the type of time that it takes. So many other people are so much better at that. I'm really bad. And so after a lot of prayer about the topic and talk obviously to my wife about it, we decided to stop and see where that calling would lead us. I knew it would be, well, as much as I could know, I thought it would be nonprofit. I thought it was going to be with kids charities, because like you, I've done a lot of stuff from coaching to Big Brothers to Boys and Girls Club to National Center for Missing Exploited Children, a bunch of other kids stuff. We really thought we were going to devote near full time doing that. And so that was the end of 2007. So been a long time now. I didn't have CNM even on the list of the top 50 things, doing job related stuff. That ended up coming up in a different way. But basically have been able to dedicate, near full time, or as much full time as I wanted it to be, to doing the nonprofit stuff. And I have not missed being I loved every single day in the business world. I had worked with great companies, had great bosses. I never had a terrible boss. Luckily, that's really lucky. So sometimes, because I had such good experiences, it's easy to think about those experiences, but I've never missed being there. And I felt for the very longest time that I was where God wanted me to be. And that's a comforting feeling when you get to be helpful and wake up in the morning and figure out what can I do to be helpful to people here, and where you don't have to worry about whether you're going to put food on the table for the family or be able to help kids through college or some of the other financial necessities that we don't have to worry about. That's a pretty fortunate place to be. And so I haven't thought twice about it. And I get to be, I got to do a few boards and go through that, and thought at one time that might be more. And I realized, if you're going to do nonprofit stuff, you should do nonprofit stuff. And so the toe goes in the water every now and then, but it's really been a good window of time to focus on that. And who knows what the next window will be. I feel that, there's probably one more window in there, and we'll have to figure out which direction that next window is going to go.
And in that answer, you mentioned CNM. And so for many listeners, they won't know what that means, but you've heard me mention, excuse me, you've heard me mention a couple times now, the Career Network Ministry. And you can look that up on Meetup, you'll see. And this is just a powerhouse of an organization that Bob's had a big hand in, created a wonderful team around him, and helped so many people in job transition. There's just one of the examples of a man walking the walk. You live a quote, one of my favorite quotes, and I keep it here so I don't have to reach far to see it, which we weren't put on this earth to make a living. We were put on this earth to make a difference. And you've really, I think you just answered in your last question, how you have certainly made a living and made a good one, and an honest, good, hardworking living. And even when you took that job that night, on that Sunday night or Monday morning, you made a big difference for a lot of other people that day. I admire the fact that in 10 years, I have never heard that story. So this is not a story that Bob leads with. This is something that Bob keeps close to his heart. But I think that it's a testament to who you are. The beauty of knowing a guest personally, like I know Bob, is that I can tell you firsthand that his success in business is surpassed by his attentiveness to his family and his kindness to others. I'm grateful we were able to have this time together, Bob. I truly am. And I wish only the best for you and yours and your family. Stay safe. Stay in that nonprofit world where we need you. Stay tight on that marketing side so I can keep funneling people to you, and you funnel the salespeople back to me, and together we're a good two-headed monster there.
You can count on that.
Thanks so much for listening. If you enjoyed today's show, please rate and recommend it on iTunes, Outcast, or wherever you get your podcasts. You can also get more information on this show and Rob at jollis.com.